All right, welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a massive mystery of the commercial world. We're going to demystify exactly how giant capital projects, think sprawling infrastructure, complex hospitals, towering high-rises, how they manage a continuous, heavy flow of money without going completely bankrupt before the ribbon is even cut.
So how exactly do you pay for a skyscraper before it's even built? Okay, let's dive into this, because it's a truly fascinating problem. When you look at a major construction site, what you're actually seeing is a massive, ongoing hemorrhage of cash. Capital projects demand incredibly heavy upfront investments. You've got raw materials, direct labor payrolls, heavy machinery deployment, all happening on day one. If a contractor had to finance all of this out of their own pocket until the building was finished, the cash flow deficit would be an absolute existential threat. They'd literally run out of money. So how does the industry actually solve this?
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll quickly run through the cash flow problem, the valuation lifecycle, how we build gross valuation, the underlying math and retention, and finally, the running scoreboard.
Starting with Section 1, the cash flow problem and how we actually fund the future. You simply cannot build the future without spending heavily in the present. The fix to this problem is what we call an interim valuation. Basically, it's a periodic assessment of the value of work completed on a project up to a very specific date. Think of it as a vital operational heartbeat that allows contractors to get paid regularly, usually every month. This infusion of cash protects supply chain liquidity. It keeps the cement pouring and the steel arriving. But just as importantly, it shields the client financing the build from the massive financial risk of overpaying for incomplete or substandard work. Moving to Section 2, the valuation life cycle. These are the rules of the game.
To make sure nobody gets shortchanged, the industry established strict rules that align the interests of three main players: the contractor building the thing, the quantity surveyor analyzing the costs, and the contract administrator overseeing the whole agreement. Let's move to and see how this builds. It's a rigorous loop that happens every single month. 4 distinct phases: application, verification, certification, and finally, disbursement. You can really see how the baton gets passed here. In Step 1, the contractor assesses their physical progress on site and submits a detailed application quantifying the gross value they believe they've hit. Then, pass the baton to the client's quantity surveyor for Step 2. They step in, audit the site, and physically measure the claim progress against the agreed-upon standards. If it checks out, Step 3. The QS prepares the valuation document so the architect can officially issue an interim payment certificate. Finally, the baton goes to the client for Step 4. They execute the payment, sending out the disbursement within a mandatory clearing period, typically 14 to 28 days.
Section 3, building gross valuation. Let's look at keeping score.
We know the steps, but how do we actually calculate the score? The absolute key to grasp here is that interim valuations are fundamentally cumulative. We are tracking total progress from day one up to right now. It's not just the last 30 days in isolation. Every calculation breaks down into specific components. You've got measured work, the actual permanent stuff built on site, variations, which are your legally approved change orders, preliminaries covering site operations and overheads like scaffolding, and a absolutely crucial one for cash flow is materials on site, or MOS. Interestingly, you usually only get paid out around 80% for MOS. Why not 100? Because it perfectly balances the contractor's out-of-pocket supply costs against the client's risk of those materials getting damaged before they're actually installed. You also have materials off-site for bespoke pieces, as long as they're legally bonded.
Bring all those components together, and you get your primary mathematical formulation. Listen closely, because this is the bedrock of the whole commercial process. The gross valuation equals the total value of measured works plus approved variations plus pro rata preliminaries plus materials on site. Boom. That is your absolute total asset value built from day one up to this exact moment.
Which brings us to Section 4, the math and retention. Basically, penalties and payouts. But wait, the contractor doesn't just get a check for that total gross amount. Now, what's really interesting to notice here is the stark contrast between these two figures. The gross valuation is the massive total value from the very first day of digging, but the net current payment due, that's the actual much smaller check that gets cut just for this specific billing cycle. We have to bridge the gap between those two numbers.
And we bridge that gap with this formula. The net current payment due equals the gross valuation minus retention minus total previously certified payments. We explicitly hold back cash to protect the client. That retention deduction is a safety net against latent defects, problems that might pop up later. And obviously, we subtract past payments because the client is absolutely not going to pay for the foundation again in month 10.
Section 5. The running scoreboard. Let's bring all of this together.
Let's actually see this in action. Walk with me line by line through a practical, real-world example. Say our contractor hits $1.25 million in core measured works. We add 85 grand in variations, 120 grand in preliminaries, and 45 grand in materials on site. That gives us a gross valuation of exactly $1.5 million. That's the total value created since day one. Now for the deductions. We strip out a 5% retention fund to protect against defects, so take $75,000 off the top. That leaves a net cumulative value of $1,425,000. Finally, we deduct the $1.15 million that the client already paid out in previous months, and there's our magic number. The $1.5 million gross valuation results in a certified net current payment of exactly $275,000 for this month.
And this brilliantly illustrates a key concept from our source material. It's incredibly helpful to visualize this entire process as an ongoing, running total scoreboard. You're always looking at the total points scored in the whole game and just subtracting the points that were already on the board in the last quarter. Whatever is left is what was earned right now.
By rigorously capturing the total value built and surgically stripping out past payments and retention, commercial managers pull off something pretty amazing. They maintain financial equity, they drastically curb the risk of overpaying, and they create total supply chain transparency. Everyone knows exactly what's been built and exactly what is owed.
So it leaves us with this profound realization about how our modern world actually gets constructed. Without the deep transparency and continuous liquidity of this monthly running scoreboard, the massive infrastructure projects we all rely on would financially collapse before they ever got off the ground. It's this delicate, highly structured balance of risk and reward that literally keeps the global supply chain moving, one valuation at a time. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.